Okay, y'all. Time for some more real talk. We're going to cover the whole cognitive situation. So, what was I thinking? Or was I even thinking at all half the time? So, before I got sick, I would say I was well above average from an intellectual perspective. I was the honor graduate in high school, all of those things. I have an accounting degree, which is one of the more difficult ones to get, and I got it. I graduated being married and having Kane 6 weeks before I graduated. So, always used to being that go-getter, kind of that overachiever. Maybe I wasn't as intellectually as intelligent or whatever as I may have thought. I just truly had that strong work ethic that maybe probably filled in the gap as well. But when the storm hit, that part of it got really ugly for me. That was really hard to handle because as it become difficult for me to have a thought process, as it become difficult for me to truly comprehend new ideas, I was still smart enough to see my struggle. I was smart enough to know that I should be able to do that, but yet I wasn't able to make that happen. And I had never really had anything before put in front of me that I had tried to learn and couldn't, or tried to understand and didn't. Now, there's things that I couldn't understand that lost my attention that I didn't care about, and we leave the rocket science to those folks. But that was humbling, to say the very least, going from being a very socially outgoing person to not really being able to carry on an in-depth conversation beyond a couple of sentences. That was very hard. The brain fog. The brain fog is an absolute understatement. If that's all it was, you would think that it would you could kind of work through it. It was outright confusion, emptiness, blankness. I didn't even think it was possible to have moments where nothing was going on. And I would say that oftentimes during this battle, during the thick of it, nothing was going on for me mentally. That was very hard to just digest and accept. I put a lot of things in place because I was determined to not lose as much ground and appearance-wise as that I had truly lost. And so I got very organized, very structured in my behind-the-scenes activity. And then it was mentally exhausting because of the preparations that I would go through to know, the encounters that I knew that I was going to have. I would already be prepped up and have my canned answers or have looked at whatever I needed to be ready for that. Whereas before, it was definitely just, popping those off. So I was always very quick-witted as well. So all of a sudden, I'm just, a lot of the time, I am at a complete loss for words. I don't even know how to respond, whereas usually I'm the one who has carried the conversation. So if you know me for a minute, you know that being social is a part of what I truly thrive on. And so that was mind-blowing within itself. I truly had to work hard to learn new things. And I had to learn them in a different way. And I had to put either a story or an association with that for them to stick. like, I can't think of a good example that I actually used then, but an example of this that had all, because that way has always worked well for me. So like Roy G. Biv, if y'all know him, y'all know all the colors of the rainbow. So things like that was now truly a part of my everyday life in learning the most basic and elementary things. So if you don't know Roy G. Biv, just know that is red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. So now if anyone asks y'all about the colors of the rainbow, you got that one checked off. So that is actually part of a learning part of it that I just continued to do even after I recovered. And bounced back. So in fact, I just presented a class last month on self-storage underwriting 101 and talked a lot about capitalization valuation. And one of the things is in the equation, NOI divided by market value equals that cap rate, and people get confused on what goes where. And I'm like, no, you'll never forget this again. NOI goes on top, NOITOP. So that is... that's a blessing, because I feel like I have been able to be forced to learn things in a new way, and now I'm able to understand that not everybody just gets it quickly. And so now as I share information with people, I feel like I'm able to do that in a better way, because I've had to learn things from several different angles. So the neurologist at one point, when I kept telling him, I'm like, it is really hard for me to think. And he's like, well, you carry on a conversation so well with me. What are you talking about? And I'm like, no, you don't understand the effort that I have to go through, because I already know what this conversation is going to be like. But then it was so exhausting afterwards. So he did run one of the, is it the EEG test or whatever? And as he came back into the room to tell me the results, it was like he was heartbroken, because he was just like we're gonna find a way around this. We're gonna work through this, because my results and my little brain waves was like way low. And so I remember celebrating this moment, because it's like I already knew this, and being able to have him validate it with a test only made me feel like I wasn't quite as crazy as everybody else thought that I was. So lots of things was put in place at this point. So if you're like, yeah, Jane, well, I sometimes I'm sharper than others. I have a little brain fog here and there. Sometimes I walk in a room and I forget what I'm going in that room for. Y'all, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about that. All of that is, that's just called living life and a lot going on. So I'm going to share with you, one of my stories, just because I want you to get your mind wrapped around where I was, so you can truly see God's goodness of how far I've come. I've come a long way. Believe me, I've come a long way. So I was a few years into this, and I was headed to catch up with the rest of my family at a baseball tournament. So the boys played travel baseball, 3 of them, and the tournaments were normally at the same park or general vicinity. And I was able to just go later in the day and catch up with them. And it was an hour and a half, 2-hour drive. This is back in the MapQuest days, where we didn't have the luxury of the GPSs on our phones or in our vehicles. You actually printed them off from the house at the house, and then you carried those directions with you on that sheet of paper, and it told you every turn to make. So I'm headed about hour and a half, 2-hour drive away to a ball field that I haven't been at. I make a turn at one point, and the list that I have with me, it's a page or 2 of instructions, I guess, of turns. Y'all, I did not know where I was at on my list of instructions. I had no idea what turn I had just made. And if you're not familiar with the whole MapQuest print them out directions, it only tells you your next turn. So I can't read this next road sign to see if it's on my paper or on my map, because only my next turn is. Now, it also tells me how far I need to go between each turn, but I don't know if I'm supposed to be going 3 miles or 5 miles or half mile. I don't know which one I'm on. So I am going down a county road with very little signage. There's no stores, there's no community that I can tell in the vicinity, and I am literally over an hour away from home, still a ways from the ball field. I'm in the middle of nowhere, y'all. I don't know where I'm at all. I'm not exactly sure how I wound up at the ball field, quite frankly. I didn't share this with my family because I feel like that would have probably really kind of freaked them out. I do remember just going really slow and looking at every road sign that I came up to, and then I would have to go through my list to see if that road name was on my list. And then we'd do that again and again and again until just finally getting that figured out. So when things like that would happen, I shared this the other day with someone, and they was like, oh, how did you like ever leave home again? Like, did that not just put a fear into you that, y'all, I don't know. I can't get on board with that whole fear thing. Like, I try not to be a part of that. I try so hard not to be a part of that. But what I did do was, from that point forward, when I printed those instructions off, a pen went with that and clipped onto that piece of paper when I put it in the Suburban. Because from that point forward, every time that I made a turn, I checked off that turn. It didn't matter. It did not matter. No, I checked it off. If the kids were with me going forward, I was by myself at that time, but from point forward, somebody had to check it off. Like, they could check it off for me. Now, they did not know until just a few years ago that the reason that we did that was because I got lost and I had no clue where I was within my instructions. So, you definitely, when you're put in these situations, you learn to put things in place to compensate for those shortcomings. The amount of mental exercises that I was doing, just from the simplest of things, the absolute simplest of things, probably the biggest help in what I did, when I did it with an absolute audience, and nobody knew how much of a blessing it was to me. So, we had an older gentleman, one of the grandparents that was on our travel ball teams, and then as we had moved into school ball at this point. And he was vision impaired. Mr. Doyle was blind. He could not see, and he loved baseball, and he did not miss a game of his grandkids. And when I realized this at one game of what was going on as everybody was celebrating, and he was sitting there going, well, what happened? What happened? And I was like, oh my goodness, I can tell him all about this. And so basically from that point forward, Mr. Doyle and we sat together at every ball game for about 4 or 5 years, because his grandkids was in amongst my kids playing. So we were always at the same ball fields. And I would call this game for him play by play, pitch by pitch by pitch. Y'all, and for me to stay locked into something for that amount of time, oh my goodness, that kind of focus, that was a miracle within itself. But now, Mr. Doyle, he couldn't see good, but he was sharp as a tack. And so he didn't play no games either. And so he knew where we were at in the lineup better than I did half the time. And then he would be like, well, isn't this the kid that went to right field last time, or that he flew out, or, you know, where he was all about. So I had to stay on my game, because I realized just telling him what the score was or the count was or whatever was not going to cut it. So if you were in any of those games, he was also a little bit hard of hearing, so I always sat on one side particularly so that he could hear me best. And I'm loud anyway. And so I'm sorry for all y'all who had to hear that was trying to watch the game in peace, and you're getting, like, the radio is on right there and you're having to hear me call it. But y'all, doing that for him took me beyond the blessing that it was to be able to bring the game to life for him. That was sweet and that was good, which him and his entire family greatly appreciated. But the blessing was really for me, because I was able to go to a next level. Because let me just tell you, Mr. Doyle just didn't follow the Trojans. He followed the Braves too. So I had to keep up with who was playing in the Braves and who had pitched last night and how they had done, and not because he was going to be either really happy about the Braves game or really upset about the Braves game. It could go either way. And his day oftentimes depended on who was winning what ball game. So he pushed me to limits that he had no idea he was pushing me to. So sometimes when we're doing things and we're truly serving others, the blessing is truly ours to have. So I would apologize for this, but this is just good stuff. So, and if it sounds kind of crazy, all I can tell you is you should have seen it in color. So let's talk about, you don't seem to be having any problem talking today, Jane. You know what? Truly, I don't have any problem talking today. The struggle that I have, I do feel like, is I have a very limited vocabulary as far as, the big words. They just don't come to me. I feel like they're kind of floating around up there when I'm trying to relay a message, but I can't tend to grab them or use them correctly. And at first that really bothered me. But I think that that's a blessing too, because I present a lot professionally. And if I stood and presented using all the big fancy words and you weren't able to truly relate to the message of how that applies to your business, I just don't think there would be the same value in what I have to say. So I'm kind of grateful that I'm not caught up into using those big fancy words, even though it's really become to where it's really not an option. But it's truly kind of crazy how that kind of works it out. A struggle for me is actually placing people, and remembering their name if I meet more than one person at a time. So for y'all who see me at trade shows, and maybe I only see you once or twice a year, and maybe not on social media with you, then you know what? It probably is a struggle for me if you bump into me when I'm by myself. Because see, what happens is when you surround yourself with the people who have strengths that are your weaknesses, that's when your team gets to shine. And fortunately, our team, they can brief me in 2 seconds and make me remember exactly who it is I'm talking to. And it may be like, no, they're the ones with the gravel drives and the blue doors. Like, yep, got it, in such and such state, or so and so. No, we talked to them. No, they're the ones who just had the grandbaby. They're the ones whatever. Veronica and Luke do a great job in making sure of just that. The other tricky place and remembering names and placing people, oh my goodness, is weddings and funerals, because you never know where those groups of people are coming from. Everybody's kind of out of their element. And so if you have seen me and I have looked right at you and I'm like, oh, and I've acted like I truly couldn't recall your name at the moment, that don't be offended. I'm just telling you, like, if you just give me a minute, it will come, it will happen. But it's really weird that that's the part that's the biggest struggle. That's the part that means the most to me. And that's my way weakest point, because it's so important, because I just absolutely love knowing people. And I want you to know that I heard your last conversation that we had. I don't care if it was 6 months ago. But that those relationships are so valuable to me. Where I don't struggle is crunching numbers and doing spreadsheets and calculating returns, figuring out, should you buy, should you build, should you expand, should you not, should you raise rents. No, that is not a struggle at all. That is just working through the numbers, and all of that happens very naturally for me. I don't do air math. My daddy and my brother's really good at that. I don't do a lot of air math anymore. Just never, but I haven't really practiced to try to bring that back, because it's just too easy and there's too many other things to do. So at any rate, I would say that how far I've come, a true marker for that. I was pinned with the CCIM designation, Certified Commercial Investment Member, several years ago. So basically what that means is I took a lot of classes, did some really in-depth investment calculations, and then along with a portfolio that you submit and all that stuff. But I took a test that lasted, I think, about 6+ hours. It's got word problems and math problems on it. Math problems usually take up a page or two. Yeah, made an 8 on that. So definitely a blessing, just in the sense that I'm able to comprehend the content, but then to actually sit through an exam and pass it with flying colors on the timetable given, an absolute blessing. That I wanted to do that for my profession, so that I would be better at what I'm doing from a commercial broker. But if we're being honest, I wanted to do it to show that I could, but I wanted to show myself that I could. I needed that. Is truly the difference there. So here we go. Now if I get bumped on the head and knocked out, and when I come to, be it that day or whenever, and y'all start asking me questions from the doctor perspective, first off, if I've been out long enough to where you took my contacts out and I don't have my glasses on and you're holding up fingers, don't be alarmed. I can't see past my nose, so I'm not going to know how many fingers you're holding up. If you ask me what day it is, I may or may not know, y'all. I don't get worked up. I don't dread Mondays, and I don't over-celebrate Fridays. Every day is a good day, period. Every day that my feet hit the floor is an amazing day, I can assure you. I am very calendared, and I know where I'm supposed to be that day, so you can ask me about that. But whether it's Tuesday or Wednesday, I may or may not know. If you're going to ask me how old my kids are, I'm probably not going to know. It changes every year, y'all. I have 3 of them. They're 18 months apart, but I do know what year they're born. So you can ask me what year they were born. Half the time I don't even know how old I am, but I know what year I'm born, so we can do the math from there. So I want to encourage you that with whatever it is that you're struggling with, own it and move on. Because it's like, if we truly believe that God's weakness, that's a good one, Jane, that our weakness is truly made through God's strength. I mean, like, only God can be the reason of where I'm at. Only God. And so if I don't own my weaknesses, then I'm taken away from him. I'm not giving him the honor and the glory for it. So here you go. This is me owning my weaknesses, which is not always pretty, but nonetheless, they're mine.